The sun beat down on Redemption Gulch like a blacksmith's hammer on steel as I rode in. Dust devils danced across the parched earth, mirroring the uneasy feeling settling in my gut. I wasn't looking for trouble, just a place to water my horse and maybe find a lead on a certain snake-eyed gambler who'd relieved me of my last $50. But trouble, in this part of the territories, had a way of finding you. A commotion up ahead snagged my attention. A rough-looking crowd, the kind with more scars than teeth, had formed a loose circle around a makeshift stage outside the saloon. And there she was. A woman, no older than 20, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes wide with terror, was being led onto the platform. Her simple dress was torn in places, and the way she flinched at every touch from the burly men escorting her told a grim story. Snatching snippets of the coarse whispers around me, the ugly truth unfurled. She'd been acquired, likely kidnapped, from a homestead further north and was being offered up for auction to the Blackwater Gang, notorious outlaws who considered this forsaken place their haven. The bidding was about to begin. My hand instinctively went to the Colt peacemaker holstered at my hip, a reflex honed by years on the frontier. But a cold calculation washed over me. There were at least a dozen of them, hard cases all, their guns already glinting in the harsh sunlight. A direct confrontation would be suicide, and likely seal her fate faster. I watched as a brutish man with a greasy beard leered at the woman, his voice booming as he started the bidding. A knot of anger tightened in my chest. I'd seen enough ugliness in this life, had even dealt my share, but the sheer helplessness in her eyes struck a chord I thought long buried. My pragmatic nature screamed at me to ride on, to not get involved. But something wouldn't let me. This wasn't just about a woman in danger. It was about the last sliver of decency in a world that seemed determined to crush it. The dust of desperation hung heavy in the air, and I knew, with a grim certainty, that my quiet ride had just come to an abrupt and dangerous end. The auctioneer, a wiry man with a cruel smile, hammered down the bids, each one feeling like another blow to the woman's spirit. The Blackwater boys were enjoying the spectacle, their laughter echoing through the dusty street. My mind raced, searching for any angle, any weakness in their crude display of power. But all I saw were guns, hard faces, and a callous disregard for human life. I thought of my own past, the times I'd crossed lines I shouldn't have, the compromises I'd made to survive. Regret, a familiar companion, stirred within me. This woman, whoever she was, didn't deserve this. Nobody did. Direct force was out. I needed another way in, a way to disrupt their game without triggering a bloodbath. An idea, reckless and improbable, began to form. It went against every instinct I had, every lesson I'd learned about survival in this brutal land. As the bidding reached a disturbing sum and the woman's face grew ashen, I took a deep breath. With deliberate slowness, I unbuckled my gun belt. The heavy leather and steel clattered to the dusty ground. A hush fell over the crowd. The auctioneer sputtered, the outlaws exchanged confused glances, and the woman on the platform looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and dawning hope. "Hold on there," I said, my voice calm despite the frantic pounding of my heart. "This ain't right. Selling a woman like she's a prize bull." The greasy-bearded outlaw, who seemed to be the leader, squinted at me. "And who in tarnation are you?" "Just a man passing through," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "A man who believes every soul deserves better than this." "You aimin' to bid, stranger," another outlaw sneered, his hand resting on his gun. "I ain't got the kind of money you're asking," I said truthfully, "but I got something else." I looked directly at the leader. "I'll wager my skills, my knowledge of the land, anything you want within reason for her freedom." The outlaws erupted in laughter. "Your skills? You think you can outdo the Blackwater Gang with just your pretty words?" "I ain't afraid to try," I said, my eyes never leaving the leaders. The impossible choice was made. I had laid down my guns, and now I had to play a far more dangerous game. The outlaws, initially amused by my audacity, quickly turned suspicious. Their leader, a hulking brute named Jedediah, eyed me like a wolf sizing up a cornered rabbit. "What kind of skills you talking about, fancy boy?" he growled. "Tracking, hunting, survival," I said, my voice firm. "I know these territories. I can guide you, find what you're looking for, better than anyone you got." Jedediah stroked his greasy beard, considering. "We ain't exactly short on guides." "But are they loyal?" I countered, letting the implication hang in the air. "I got nothing to gain by double-crossing you, unlike some of your own men, maybe." A few uneasy glances passed between the outlaws. The woman on the platform watched our exchange, her expression a fragile mix of fear and a nascent hope. I risked a quick glance at her, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod to reassure her. After a tense silence, Jedediah spat on the ground. "All right, stranger, we'll bite. But you step out of line, you try anything funny, and you both pay the price. You understand?" "Perfectly," I said, my relief a small, hidden thing. The terms were crude but offered a sliver of opportunity. I would work for them for a week, and if my services proved valuable, they would release the woman. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was better than the alternative. Over the next few days, I was put to the test. They used me to track game, scout for rival gangs, and even fix their broken wagon wheel. I kept my head down, worked hard, and observed everything. I learned the outlaws' routines, their weaknesses, their internal squabbles. The woman, whose name I learned was Sarah, was kept under guard but not subjected to the auction, at least not yet. Whenever our paths crossed, a silent understanding passed between us. I saw her quiet strength, the resilience in her eyes that belied her delicate appearance. One evening, as I was tending to the horses, a young, skittish outlaw named Billy approached me. He seemed different from the others, his eyes holding a hint of unease about their actions. He mumbled something about his sister back home and slipped me a small, rusty key. "For her. Just in case," he whispered before hurrying away. It was a small act of defiance, a glimmer of hope in the shadows, and it told me that even in this den of vipers, not all hearts were entirely black. The week with the Blackwater Gang crawled by, each day a tightrope walk between proving my worth and not betraying my true intentions. Jedediah remained suspicious, his eyes constantly watching me. But I had earned a grudging respect for my skills, and the threat of the auction loomed less heavily over Sarah. The rusty key Billy had given me burned a hole in my pocket. I'd managed to discreetly speak a few words with Sarah, enough to convey that I had a plan, however risky. The key, she'd confirmed with a trembling voice, opened the lock on the storage shed, where she was being held at night. Our chance came during a fierce thunderstorm. The wind howled, the rain lashed down, and the outlaws, holed up in the saloon, were distracted by cheap whiskey and louder boasts. Under the cover of the tempest, I slipped away from my assigned task of guarding the horses. Sarah was waiting, huddled in the darkness of the shed. Her eyes widened with relief as I fumbled with the lock. The rusty mechanism groaned, and finally, with a click, the door creaked open. We moved swiftly and silently, sticking to the shadows, the storm our only ally. The town was small, but the surrounding territory was vast and unforgiving. Our goal was to reach the abandoned shepherd's cabin I'd spotted a few days earlier, a few miles out of town, where we could hopefully find shelter and supplies. The journey was treacherous. The rain-swollen creek was a raging torrent, and the muddy ground made every step a struggle. We had no horses, and the fear of being discovered spurred us onward. Sarah, despite her ordeal, showed surprising strength, her determination fueled by the prospect of freedom. Along the way, we shared brief, hushed conversations. I learned she was a schoolteacher, traveling west to meet her fiancé when the Blackwater Gang had ambushed her stagecoach. Her vulnerability was evident, but so was an inner resilience that I admired. Just as we thought we were in the clear, a stray dog barked in the distance, followed by a shout. They had discovered our escape. The hunt was on. We pushed ourselves harder, the storm beginning to subside, the first hints of dawn painting the eastern sky with streaks of grey and pink, a beautiful but dangerous promise of a new day. The shouts grew closer, carried on the crisp morning air. We reached the shepherd's cabin, a dilapidated structure that looked like it might collapse with a strong gust of wind. It offered little more than a leaky roof and 4 crumbling walls, but it was temporary shelter, a place to catch our breath and frantically plan our next move. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of old dust and abandonment. We found a few meagre supplies, a dented tin pot, a half-empty sack of flour, and a rusty axe, remnants of a life long gone. We barricaded the door as best we could, using what little broken furniture remained. We knew it wouldn't hold for long against determined men. The outlaws would be upon us soon. The realization hit hard. We were cornered, outgunned, and our escape route was cut off. Desperation, a cold, heavy knot, gnawed at me. But I looked at Sarah. Her face, though pale and smudged with dirt, held a determined resolve that mirrored my own burgeoning fight. I knew I couldn't give up. Not now. When the outlaws finally arrived, their angry yells echoing across the desolate landscape, we were ready as we could be. I had found a few loose floorboards, creating makeshift loopholes through which I could aim. Sarah, surprisingly, remained calm. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a survivor. She moved with quiet efficiency, handing me rocks to use as makeshift projectiles for distraction, her eyes scanning for any advantage. The tension inside the small cabin was palpable, a coil tightening with every approaching footstep. The ensuing confrontation was brutal and chaotic. Shots rang out, splintering the old wood of the cabin and kicking up clouds of dust. We were hopelessly outnumbered, but the cabin, despite its frail appearance, offered a defensible position, a last stand. I focused on picking off the closest threats, making every shot count, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. Sarah, instead of cowering, became my unexpected anchor, her unwavering presence and quiet courage providing a much-needed boost to my own dwindling resolve. Her quiet words of encouragement, almost lost in the din, kept me fighting when the instinct to flee screamed loudest. Just when it seemed our luck had run out and the outlaws were about to breach the protesting door, a familiar figure appeared on the ridge overlooking the cabin. My breath hitched. It was Billy, the young outlaw who had given me the key, and he wasn't alone. 3 other riders, their faces grim and set, were with him. Hope, thin and fragile, flickered within me. A brief but fierce gunfight erupted between Billy's small faction and the rest of the Blackwater Gang. It turned out that Billy, along with a few others who had grown weary of Jedediah's cruelty and the gang's increasing barbarity, had decided to make their own stand. They had seen enough, and something within them, a flicker of what was right, had finally ignited. Their intervention was a desperate gamble, but it was one that paid off. The tide turned quickly. Jedediah, caught off guard by the betrayal from within his own ranks, was either wounded or, along with a few of his most loyal men, fled into the vast, indifferent landscape. The remaining outlaws, demoralized and leaderless, quickly surrendered, their fight draining out of them like sand from a broken sack. The dust settled, leaving a scene of quiet devastation. The broken cabin, spent cartridges, and the uneasy silence of a battle concluded. Sarah and I emerged from the cabin, shaken but alive. Billy and his companions approached, their faces etched with weariness but not with malice, their eyes reflecting a weary understanding. They had chosen a different path, a path away from the darkness of the Blackwater Gang, a difficult journey towards their own uncertain future. The future for all of us remained uncertain. Sarah's fiancé would need to be found, a monumental task in this sprawling territory. Billy and his group would have to face the consequences of their rebellion, seeking their own redemption. But standing there in the aftermath of the storm and the gunfight, a fragile, hard-won sense of hope bloomed in the harsh landscape. I had come to Redemption Gulch looking for a lost $50, a simple, selfish quest. But I was leaving with something far more valuable, the profound knowledge that even in the darkest corners of the West, courage and compassion could still ignite a path towards redemption, for yourself and for others. And the woman I had laid down my guns to rescue stood beside me, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, now free to face whatever came next.